From deep behind the enemy lines of FEMA Region 3, you're listening to the Powder Monkey Podcast on PirateInfoWars.com.
Welcome to the Powder Monkey Podcast. The episode today, the title, we're going to go with "Let's Go, Brandon." And not for the reason that you would think that we are. With us today, really appreciate him coming on. We have Brandon Steele. Brandon is a patriot. He is a House of Delegates member for West Virginia in the 29th District. And so, Brandon has done some things here recently that I just think needs recognition. We sort of talked about it on a couple episodes back, but I think it's really important that the listening audience, people that may not see it on Facebook or have an opportunity elsewise to hear the words that he said in that, and we're going to link to that in the actual description as well. But just to hear the words that Brandon said, I think it's something that needs to be said, and not enough people are saying. So, Brandon, welcome aboard the Powder Monkey. We greatly appreciate you coming on. Just to kind of give our listening audience a rundown, if you will, just give them a brief, bio, and then we'll get into maybe start with House Bill 335 and go from there.
Okay, thanks again, Sean. I appreciate you having me on here to discuss this. And of course, I'm Brandon Steele, and as Sean said, I represent Raleigh County, District 29 in the West Virginia House of Delegates. I'm chairman of the Government Organization Committee, and I've been in the legislature. I was elected November 2018, so since January 2019, I've served Raleigh County and West Virginia in the legislature. Grew up in Raleigh County, right outside of Beckley, and graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School. And from there I went to the Marines and joined the United States Marine Corps coming out of high school. Served in the Marines, got my undergraduate degree, and I went to work as a financial advisor in Beckley. And after a few years of that, I went to law school at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and graduated with my law degree, and came back to West Virginia and started my law practice. And I've served as an assistant prosecutor in Raleigh County, and I resigned to run for the House of Delegates from there.
Right. And I think at that point is where initially John and I met you. I think we were introduced by the great American Thomas Collins, and so
Tommy boy.
And so but that was the first time that I think John and I have for a long time seen where we are now coming down the tracks. And at that point, we were just at the very tip of where social media was beginning to censor, according to, it was slipping less from a public square to more of a curated platform. And so, Chanda, the two of you, I think that was sort of a 1-2 punch for people who were looking for people who would speak truth to power. And I'm not blowing sunshine up your butt when I say this, man, but not just then. You weren't afraid to say it like it is, but what you said on September 17th and September 19th, I really would like, and what you published on Facebook, I really would like my listeners to, wherever they
cut out on me there first.
understand how powerful those words were. I think it's one of the greatest things I've ever heard an elected official say. And again, I'm not blowing smoke up your butt, man, but I just that is what really needs to be said. You confirmed some things to me. I mean, with this podcast, we tend to get a little bit of, like I told you before we went live, or not live, but before we press record, it's just I don't know, man. We are just at a point in history where it's just surreal. You made the statement, that you were really concerned about what we as a people are doing to each other right now. And but I guess House Bill 335. Let's start there. You all have taken some steps. Explain to the people in West Virginia what this does, and the protections that it'll afford them, and what they can pursue if for some reason they aren't protected.
Yeah. So starting with House Bill 335, probably the place that you have to start is, what is the history of West Virginia with forced vaccination? And apparently we love it. We've been doing it for a long time, and we do it better than any other state in the union. Yep. I can't explain that a people so independent and so free would so readily adopt historically. I'm talking going back generations, guys. I mean, this isn't something that cropped up this week. You could go back 100 years, and we have strong public health laws is right. How this is getting classified. And that's something that when you go in, whether it's a Democrat majority or a Republican majority, there's some things that are a shared ethos. There's some things that are, if it can't, well, and Sean, you watch us. I mean, you see it. Vote 100-0 or 0-100. We did that to the governor's tax plan the last session. That was kind of fun. But, there's some things that are just shared across both parties as just part of who we are. One of those things is mandatory vaccination programs. I don't know why we've done it that way. I don't know how we evolved as a state to believe in that kind of police power, but that's certainly alive and well in West Virginia. So House Bill 335, I would tell you, is the first time ever in West Virginia history where we set forth in law that you have a reasonable religious or medical exemption to forced vaccination. And it's definitely the first time that also in there is natural immunity. So if a person has the antibodies or whatever the case might be, they have a valid exemption as well. That's the first time that's ever been achieved in West Virginia history. I've heard people talk about it like it's apocalyptic either way. I've heard folks with the Chamber of Commerce and Manufacturers Association and so forth talk about how this is going to shut their hospitals down. They're going to lose all their funding and everything else. And that's scary. I mean, you're talking about going in there and voting with that on your mind of, what if this does do that? What if the people we're representing won't be able to get health care or something like that? And you got to make a calculated decision. And my calculated decision can always fall back on the Constitution.
Amen.
What is the higher purpose? Is it that my citizens that I represent have the ability to exercise their free will and judgment in for their own reasons? Or am I going to take that away and I'm going to silence that? And that's where I fall back is, looking at that problem, that's the line. That's the line that we should all go in there with is, how is this harming the constitutional rights of the citizenry? And you can look, the surprising thing, guys, the West Virginia Code fit in one book 100 years ago. The whole thing, one little book. Now it takes up a bookshelf. And we have an administrative state. We have a bureaucratic state. And that's not just West Virginia. I mean, across the nation.
It's everywhere.
We've copied ourselves and assimilated ourselves away from a tripartite government to a tripartite government that ceded its legislative control to the executive branch, which has delegated it to unelected people across the state.
Right.
Man, I want to applaud what you just said, because you articulated for me a feeling that I have had, and you articulated it in a way that made it really just point blank poignant. This is what has happened, is the administrative has turned over their power that was granted to them by us to some unelected bureaucrat that fits into a mold that works for our agenda, whatever that may be. And I've seen this as just a constituent. I'm not a constituent of yours, but I'm still a constituent of the state of West Virginia. I'm a lawful American, and I do exercise my right to vote. And I just want to see that process is honored and respected the way it should be. I feel a lot of disrespect towards our legislative body, just because of not because of partisan politics, is because where are your balls? Like, where are you at?
Not enough
because
people.
You're my representative, and you know who I want to represent me? I want somebody who's willing to fight for what's right.
And that's one of the things.
And you've done great too, Brandon.
And that's one of the things that you said in your September the 17th video is, it's not just a poll that we're going off of, where 600 people voted in, you're getting calls. You are the front line. You are the voice of the people in your district, and I'm sure elsewhere as well. I'm sure many people have turned to you and voiced their opinions to you. And and I thought that was one of the more powerful parts of that of that video, is that this, regardless of all the other rabbit holes that people think I go down, years ago when we first met, I was saying, big tech, we have to stop what is happening to, with big tech. And I understand the importance of free speech, and I believe in the free market. And so that is a tricky thing, and it can be a slippery slope. But honestly, big tech itself now is a slippery slope, and we're almost off the edge of it. Presidents are being censored. And we'll get on to that. You just mentioned bureaucracy, and then I went with technocracy. And so, but it's all the same. They're all mechanisms toward one goal. And, with it, you made the statement, you said it's fundamentally offensive to the very fabric of our nation and what it means to be a citizen of the United States, in that. And I mean, it is, I'm to the point. I live in a world now, Brandon, where I have to call and text my son because he's up at WVU and say, "Stay strong, boy. Don't the CDC is now calling him over and over again, about vaccines and being vaccinated, and all the people up there handing out flyers to him constantly. And all I can say is just stay strong. You're going to see the end of this. This will not stand, to quote the dude." So, but yeah, I mean, just to go into that, this gave people, if they are injured, this gave them some recourse, I guess, maybe. And if maybe not just injured, but it sounds to me, like what you mentioned on the 19th, we're also looking at employers And with the insurance premiums, we're creating different classes. And in the video that Chanda Atkins and I did, she clearly talked about, we're segregating, but who can see that because it's not on YouTube anymore. So
no, and that issue in particular is so surprising to me, because the very people that were fighting to get Obamacare passed 10 years ago are the very same people that are now telling me to separate the wheat and the chaff in the plan and charge the chaff a little bit more,
Right.
and violating the law they advocated 10 years ago to come up with. I mean, makes absolutely no sense. That's the whole thing. I mean, the whole thing they wanted was, it didn't matter if you're on death's doorstep, you get health insurance, and you got to give them the same rate that you give everybody else.
Right.
I mean, I know from working in the criminal justice system that a person with HIV can cost the jail system up to $1 million a year. $1 million a year for jail health care.
Right.
So you can imagine what your private pay health insurance plan.
Absolutely.
It's uninsurable to say, no, we're not going to cover that pre-existing condition, and then still offer them medical care.
Oh, yeah.
Sometime over the last 20 years, and maybe longer, I think it actually goes back to Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton in the 90s, when she was advocating for universal health care back then. You had to change the American narrative.
Mm-hmm.
You had to do it very convincingly and repeatedly, because there's this thing called the Constitution. Guys, I'm going to keep going back to that. But it enumerated the powers of government. And then it said, if we didn't write it down here, the states get to do it.
Right.
They became unclear on that, so they did an amendment that said the same exact thing to do it again. But then beyond that, it says, here are the inalienable rights of every citizen. Government can do anything they want between the states and the feds, but you can't do these. Okay? It is a prohibition against our government. Okay? It is our bill against the government to say these are lines you can't cross.
Right.
It is our covenant.
It
is our covenant.
Nowhere in that whole document does it say that there is a human fundamental right to health care and each citizen shall be provided health care. Right. Never said that. That's not something that started getting said until, I hate to say it, Lyndon Johnson and then Nixon, but really Hillary Clinton. She's the one that tried to change this narrative to go along with it is a human right. So it becomes a constitutional right. And now you have a great amount of the population sitting there thinking, I have a right to health care. No, you never did. It never said that. It never said that.
And it's amazing to me because at the time that was going on, I was working at Global Contact Services, and I was working for companies like AIG. I was working for not working for them, but as a private contractor calling and things like that. But I literally, they would have TVs going in the I guess just to kind of give people something to do in between calls. But the news was on a lot during that time because, the stock market was crashing and everything else, and all the bailouts were going on. And at that time, I literally watched Obamacare force single mothers who could make it on one job at that point into having to get two jobs because the definition of what full-time was changed. So hours were cut. And then, of course, on top of that, as all of these corporations started, having financial trouble and started asking for bailouts, then they started cutting work back on top of all that. So it felt, the word pandemic is being passed around a whole lot, with COVID right now, but that was an economic pandemic, I feel. And again, not to take it down a rabbit hole, and that's, but But I saw the dismantling of the American middle class there with that, and so here we are now. And as a prosecutor, with that background, some of the things that are being said right now, I'm sure you watch it and you scratch your head to Congress members. When Rand Paul gets up and he talks about the gain of function, and how many times do people have to go in front of how many things have to leak about Peter Daszak, and talking about Wuhan. And it just, and again, I'm not going
Just
down
go
a
ahead
rabbit
and
hole.
say it.
Every time I go
Fauci,
down a rabbit hole, shut me up. But
Fauci needs to be arrested. That is my own personal human right to believe that way.
Let's talk about that from a high level real quick.
Okay.
It could be right. It could be wrong. It is inconsequential. As an American, I have a right to prevent the government, or I have the right to be free from a government that's putting something in my body against my will. It was never an enumerated power of theirs. That was something that was left to the state. And I trust my state legislature a whole lot more than I do the national one.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I know how to get a hold of them on the phone,
For this reason right here.
Yeah. You're dealing with another thing that I've seen that I would tell you over the last 4 years of doing this, that I believe now more than ever, is this idea of globalism. Globalism is what's really going on with this whole thing.
Well, I didn't want to take it there, but you said the G word, so
let's go, Brandon.
So we go back to House Bill 335,
right? And
you saw that pass the House of Delegates, 68 to 32 or something of that nature.
68 to 32 were absent, I believe. So.
Oh, okay. 68 to 30 and 2 were absent. Okay. So that passes the House. Well, the governor put it on a call, and then House Bill 335 was introduced. Well, that day I had to take it up in committee, and of course the committee meeting had been posted for 24 hours, so we went with the following morning. And that was the only bill we took up. And, I put the bill out there, and Jeff Foster moved the question. And, they questioned folks from the industry, folks from the Chamber of Commerce and everything else. And basically what you had the lobbyists and representatives of the Chamber of Commerce, the Manufacturers Association, the Hospital Association, all of them concerted coming in there and lining up as we were doing this bill. And, it was a party line vote, but the 6 Democrats that are on that committee went on for probably 30 or 40 minutes asking questions and keeping those people talking. And I don't think a single Republican spoke the whole time until roll was called. And we had a roll call vote, 19-6. And that's the exact makeup of the committee, is 19 Republicans, 6 Democrats. And, I really thought about it going out of there. It's like, these are the same people they accuse us of being beholden to.
Right.
That comes up every campaign. Oh, he's just a tool of the Chamber of Commerce, or he gets that corporate money, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, the same people that you're accusing that of, drove down to Charleston, just did their job and kept their mouth shut. Right. That's where I go back to. I trust the state legislature more than a federal one.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll tell you why. If this goes away tomorrow for me, Sean, I'm fine. I still work. I've got a job. I mean, this is
right.
The end all be all for me.
You're being a servant.
It's something you do to serve your community.
Absolutely.
And be a voice for the people that are sending you there.
Yes, sir. You're a representative. That's exactly what you do. Thank you.
And if you talk to a lot of delegates, I mean, we are a citizen legislature, so you have taxi cab drivers, you have truck drivers, you have attorneys like me, you have doctors, nurses, small business owners, insurance salesmen. I mean, you have a makeup of your community there. Congress isn't like that. And that the whole idea of federal Congress right now, with the level of money it takes to get there, with the the amount of support that has to come from corporate America into the federal election system, it's impossible for them not to be bought and paid for. I mean, it's not unreasonable to think that most of the legislation coming out of D.C. was created by a lobbyist or a lobbying firm and fed right into the system. And I can tell you, as an attorney, I tend to write my own bills, but there are groups that do come and have good ideas for legislation that maybe things that we're not thinking of. But I sit down with my lawyer, I have a lawyer on my committee as my counsel, and we vet it and we look at it and we call the opposition and ask them what's going on with it. Because there's a lot of issues out there that can be really esoteric. Maybe it's a water quality or air quality standard issue. And those things you do need to talk to the people in the community about. Sure. A lot of that comes up with PSC, with like Appalachian Electric Power. Yeah, we talk to them all the time because they're dealing with technical stuff that maybe a lot of us don't understand. But one of the things we tend to understand is people's rights. And those are paramount to the I just have to say, the globalists. Right. The Chamber of Commerce, these guys, they want a system that is exactly the same from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, covering the face of the earth. So, and that's something that you got to be wary of and be thinking about is, well, are we changing for change's sake? Or are we doing this for a legitimate reason?
Well, and that's, people can talk about conspiracy theory all they want, but the first time I ever heard of the global elite or the Illuminati or whatever you want to call it was my grandmother, when she would, in church, when they would talk about the one world religion and how you wouldn't be able to buy or sell unless you had this mark. And then, just there's so many things that, and again, I'm not a former prosecutor. I don't have a law degree, but as I understand it, psychopaths like to leave little hints and little clues. And just when I see the patent for the tracking and all the cryptocurrency is 060606, and the House bills are for COVID tracking have 666 attached to them. I mean, again, maybe it's just me. Maybe there's no scientific basis for it, but that chill up my spine still is real. And I just, like you said, when they're all pushing for a global credit score, when they're all pushing for a carbon carbon taxes that's going to be attached, when they're all pushing for universal basic income, it just doesn't end well. I've read the book. I know how it ends, and it doesn't bode well for the people that try to instill that. It's Babylon over and over again. It's just a Babylon system. And I know that we have the separation of church and state, but how far until we have the argument being passed around and spread by the media that the idea that, well, since it's written that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that maybe those aren't valid because we never had a Creator, so how could we have those rights? I mean, just something like that. I mean, I never thought I would see the things happen. I never thought that we would be this close to, them going to schools. I mean, the World Health Organization is, they're talking about, just sending, in some of these other countries, just sending your kid to school is implied consent, and they can give them vaccinations. How do we keep that from coming to West Virginia? I had mentioned the CDC shielding, and maybe I'm just reading the law wrong, but that sounds awful sketchy to me, man. And I want to trust, I want to believe, but it just is there a golden line? I mean, some kind of silver lining to that cloud as far as the shielding and everything like that. And is it going to come to West Virginia?
I would say it to you in this way. I don't know if things like that are really going on or they're not.
Right.
We see information and we have to weigh it. We have to judge it. Some people are going to see it one way and some are going to see it another. This actually goes back to what I'm going to say, though, is this actually goes back to another bill. Sorry, my wife's walking in with lumber.
Oh, it's all good, man. No problem at all. I lost my co-host, so it's all good.
Well, I figured it would be better to have a coughing fit outside rather than inside. My chlorophyle.
Right. Okay, so let him get back to it, though.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm back.
No, you're okay. Where was I at?
Well, you let's see here. You were talking about we were talking about CDC shielding and everything like that.
What I want you to think about is this goes back to House Bill 2694. I don't know if you remember that, the Second Amendment Preservation Act. That's a bill that I wrote and sponsored, that basically the idea is we took California's sanctuary city law, where they basically said, the federal government can enforce its own immigration law. California law enforcement isn't allowed to participate. And President Trump fought that and took it to court. And ultimately, the Ninth Circuit ruled that no, the federal government cannot commandeer your local law enforcement to carry out its means. So we took that and applied it to firearms laws. So basically, what the law says is no West Virginia law enforcement officer can participate in, undertake, or charge someone with a federal gun crime that's not also illegal under West Virginia law.
Sure.
So if the ATF gets information that somebody has 10 revolvers with no serial number on them, serial number obliteration, that's not illegal under West Virginia law. It is under federal law.
Right.
They can't call the local drug and violent crime task force to go in and serve that warrant, charge that person, and get them out. So what the ATF is going to have to do is they're going to have to use their personnel in the state of West Virginia to carry out that warrant. Well, they only have like 8 people in their office, and it's in Pittsburgh.
Right.
So covering Southwest PA and West Virginia. I actually think they have part of Ohio. So, it's not practical that, Joe Biden's executive order on red flag laws could be carried out if your own apparatus isn't there to support it.
Sure.
Because we have an apparatus here. I think there's only 13 revenue agents with the IRS in West Virginia. It's the least by far of any state.
Sure.
They simply don't have the personnel here to carry that out. So I would also look at, in the coming session, what I would like to see is that same concept get applied to this. Our DHHR doesn't have to cooperate with them by giving them the statistics as they come back from the hospital. We could order them not to give that up.
Right.
I mean, we could do that. I mean, that would be a non-commandeering type of action. I think that would be helpful in containing what you're talking about. They are 90% of the time, Sean, relying on state data to conduct their federal policy. They don't have a federal think tank evaluating things going on in West Virginia. They have to use our data, whether that's from the DMV, DHHR, the Secretary of State's office with your voting records and stuff. Those are all by the state government. The federal government doesn't keep anything like that. There is no federal registration or anything. Go ahead.
I mean, but that leads me to a question. Like our Fourth Amendment says that we're right to have our personal papers and stuff. Does that apply to the state as well? I mean, is the state at that point a civil entity that it has the right to preserve its documents independent from the federal?
Yeah, there's.
So, in other words, West Virginia can tell the feds kick stones.
Well, in a way, that's what he's saying. Yeah,
that's exactly it. That would be a form of non-commandeering. You're not going to utilize the resources we expend to, compile this data, and then you from us. I mean, you don't get to do that.
Let me ask you this. Okay, so state data, but what about and this goes into that technocracy. What about third-party data? A lot of people don't realize that when restaurants started to open up again, and when you could actually get into a restaurant again, when we came out of the zombie apocalypse, I like to refer to it as, a strange thing popped up, and there were no more menus. Instead, you were scanning barcodes. Or I'm sorry, not barcodes, but smart tags, QR codes.
QR.
And what that was a contact tracing, and again, I'm not trying to rabbit hole. I don't have, documentation on it, but as I understand it, that was put in for the purpose of contact tracing in some way. Now, I don't know what information you have on that, or if you can verify that, or, but.
No, I don't know. Any of that stuff works with the QR codes and stuff like that. I will tell you that a lot of the restaurants, even around Beckley, you go in and they didn't give you a menu, but there was a sticker on the table. Scan the QR code, get the menu. So I know what you're talking about. Now, as far as that being used to, from a database standpoint, I don't know.
I mean, we things like with and
your bigger point, I think, is exactly what you said. What about third parties? We walk around with this phone turned on all day long. They already know everything you're doing.
Yes.
I mean, my goodness, I've been walking around and just had the thought of, okay, my wife's birthday's coming up or Christmas is coming up. And the exact thing I'm thinking about pops up on my phone,
Yes.
I didn't even say anything, or anything like that. I mean, it's like the thing has a mind of its own. But all that data between Apple and Google and Facebook and Twitter and everything else, I mean, your web browser and all, you've signed this away so many times.
Right.
We really give our personal data that to your point, Sean, the federal government would not be able to get unless they had a search warrant with probable cause.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So we're giving it away anyway.
Yeah.
And we gave it up so that the flashy blue screen would make us feel good.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
Mapping the human domain.
That's
what it's called, mapping the human domain.
And if you look at how it happened, it was ingenious.
Absolutely.
We voluntarily gave it to you and signed a release that you can do whatever you want with it.
And for people who are listening, I'm just going to say, but look up LifeLog. Just Google LifeLog.
Yeah. And
when LifeLog ended, and when Facebook began, and now we're evolving to the metaverse.
The meta.
And it kind of smacks of the Matrix, where people are in their pods, which. Again, not going down a rabbit hole, but DARPA even talked at some point about putting, people in pods. So, we're seeing, and again, not just the thing that's in our pocket that would have given Orwell, just chills up and down his leg, like what's the dude who got thrills up and down his leg whenever Obama would talk to him. What was the?
I don't know. There was a lot of them.
Anyway. But it's just, man, it's so far beyond just that pocket, just Big Brother being in our pocket. Now, if somebody wants to see something really creepy, watch Black Mirror and then look at what Boston Dynamics has gotten, and now realize that they're live and they're walking around doing security with 50 calibers on their back. And that's the animal version. Look up, people can Google Atlas if they want to by Boston Dynamics. That's a Terminator. So, the military's being purged, people who are mad at their local school councils are now being investigated. And it all, there's been a chilling effect on the media. I'm not even going into the Project Veritas news that broke. I mean, just there's so many things. And how is we the people? I know, and again, I believe in the free market. I had a preacher come on, and I believe it was divinely inspired, that before this whole COVID thing happened, he talked about the best way to beat it is to not participate in it. Don't spend your money at a place that is pushing, policies you don't agree with. Let your dollar do the voting. But when you get to a point where you no longer have a dollar because it's all a universal basic income, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think we're teetering on something here. They're talking about supply line issues, and a country boy can survive. Okay, we can skim bucks, we can run trout lines, but I mean, it's just. You made the statement, we are, you used the word authoritarian in that September 17th video. And that tells me that somewhere down the line, something has failed horribly. And if we don't right the ship, if we don't get those constitutional safeguards back in check, and if we don't have trust in our election process and our medical, the medical system and all the things that are failing us, it's only a short step between right on time delivery breaking down and,
starvation.
Yeah. And maybe I'm just listening to too many things, too many different talk shows, but I can see it. It's real. It's palatable. I mean, I wake up and, like I said, in a reality where I am texting my kids every day saying, "Do not take the shot if they come to your school. Don't if they kick you out of WVU, so what? Don't take it. If you don't want to take it, don't take it." And so I just. How do if our forefathers were alive today, Brandon, and I know you've studied the Constitution, I know that you have some background in the people that framed them, but in your opinion, if they just all magically appeared and had a few days to mull over what has happened and what has transpired, what do you think they would say? And I mean, what do you think the framers of the Constitution would think about where we are today?
Well, I think that, myself, that I think the first thing would be the contempt that you have for some parts of the document, but the love you have for others, in that. It's like, you have to take this system of government as a whole. You can't take that whole document and say, hey, 80% of this looks really good. This other 20% we're just not going to talk about. We're not going to bring up, because that's what keeps the whole thing together.
Right.
And so many times the things that people want to forget are those rights retained by the citizen that the government can't infringe upon. And I think that's where, somebody like Jefferson or somebody like Hamilton may look up and say, yeah, maybe we should have had this as section number 1. This Bill of Rights thing. Maybe that should have been the first section, just establish who's really in charge of this thing. The other thing, I think they would have regretted trying to keep money out of politics, or regretted not trying to keep money out of politics. It's something they all saw coming as the world was changing in the late 1700s, going into the 1800s. you're starting to have actual manufacturing happen. You know, the East India Trading Company is the most powerful company in the world, or at least was. And they just saw this coming. They saw it on the horizon, and they tried to develop a system that would counterbalance itself so much that there was no real way to make it move in one direction too far too fast. That's one thing that I've learned about government. But I think the thing that I think they would have went back and addressed would have been, of all the things we didn't control the money going into politics. And that we should have probably paid more attention to. But I think if they were to react how people are living today in accordance with that, they'd just be shocked. I mean, they came up with a whole branch of government that didn't exist in the original document. And it's the largest, most well-funded, and unelected body in the world. And that is the bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. And I think just the very sight of that and the largesse that has just grown out of it, and that authoritarian style control from an unelected person, that would scare me to death if I was one of the founders. That was the thing they were trying to get rid of. And I hope the reports are right, that the Supreme Court is going to wake up to exactly what Steve Bannon talked about. And that is, if we want to get ourselves back to where we're supposed to be from a size of the federal government standpoint, the role of the state government standpoint, and the rights of the individual citizen, and get that balance back, you have to get rid of the federal bureaucracy. That's what we should have been doing.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but this poses a question to me: is like, who do you see that are of the same spirit that is the up and coming leaders such as yourself? Is there anybody else out there? Are there other people out there that you see on the horizon that are actually going to follow that good faith sentiment and follow it and do it? I mean, do we have any hope looking forward, or are you the last bastion? I mean, are you guys the greatest generation, really?
No, I think there's a lot of people in government, at least elected. You could pull a majority of the members of my caucus in the House, and they would be saying the exact same thing to you. Yeah. You mentioned Chanda before, and you've probably met Tony Painter and other people. Mark Dean. I mean, a lot of these guys are just salt of the earth, and they're not beholden to anybody. And so I think you'd be surprised among your state legislators, at least in the House, you'll find people that are not so, wrapped up in it, that they just go do the right thing. The problem is that's not who controls your federal Congress. When it's, well, and frankly, there's too much prestige and too much wealth that comes from becoming a congressman. It has nothing to do with the salary, but the prestige, the fame, and the wealth that come from, maybe you serve, 2 terms in Congress. Now you're the CEO of a company worth $10 billion, or you're running some think tank, or
being a host of the Powder Monkey podcast. We're huge in PACs. We're huge in PACs.
There you go. So there's too much money and influence tied to that mainstream narrative, that just a simple fact that I would do an interview with you guys and talk about this stuff. Oh, that can't be our choice. That kind of thing.
Man, most
we hope it doesn't work that way.
I mean, and honestly, like I said, it's it's something that people need to be vocal about. I had the privilege of seeing you, being there, and kind of from seeing you claw and fight for what you for where you're at right now. I mean, it was but at the same time, I never had a doubt that the people were gonna, we're gonna see what, you were one of the most genuine people,
I agree.
out there, and that's
Thank
what we were in search of, man. I mean, and again, to circle back a little bit, you all just, you said the things that we were hoping to hear, and as we talked, to people as we were knocking doors, as we were making calls, the Democrats, that renewed my faith in people quite a bit, because I hear a lot of the negative, and
Yeah.
but to see, veterans who, Vietnam veterans, Korean veterans, and everybody, even, hard blue, they'd be listed as hard blue on my sheet, but they would be, they would all say the same thing. I'm a Democrat. I'm a registered Democrat, but my party left me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people said that in Virginia recently. And, it does my heart good to see the Brandon Steeles, the Chanda Atkins, the Tucker Davises, the Samuel Lusks, the Thomas Collins, everybody who does it. And I'm gonna throw this out there. For wherever you live, wherever you're listening to this right now, if you want to be boots on the ground, find somebody who is saying the things that need to be said, and will do the things that need to be done, and put your time into that. That's where it all happens, is door to door, face to face, heart and mind, one heart, one mind at a time. And it's not a hard sell. Hey, do you want to be free? Do you want to live free of mandates? Do you not want them eventually coming for you for your protection and loading you on a train somewhere? Because that's historically where it goes. I've read books, I know, and we are in the midst of that exact same battle plan being played out, And Brandon, just, like I said, you have absolutely just been a faithful, a representative to your servant. I mean, to your constituents, and so your service, your everything. I know you don't do it for the money, and you probably don't do it for all that great press that you get sometimes either.
That's key to keeping people free. Pay the politicians so poorly nobody wants to do it.
It's got to rank up there around podcast host or something.
Yeah.
But
assistant podcast host, by the way.
8 minutes. Anything that we didn't cover? I always find great interviews, and this is an important interview. But I always find the great ones that when I go back and listen, they're kind of like the fight that you got in grade school, and you think, man, I should have said that, or I should have done that. So, is there anything that we didn't touch? Is there anything that you want to tell your constituents and any other patriot, any other person listening to this podcast? What do you have to say to them in closing?
There's times that we can look at the circumstances of the world and become very grim, and we have a bleak outlook sometimes when we look at circumstances. And I think the one thing that we have to remember is America has come through like some really horrendous stuff, and a lot of which is worse than what's going on right now.
Oh yeah.
This is not the first time. So I would say, one, don't be surprised when America has one of these really rough growing pains. It happens all throughout her history. It's not the end of the world, because we usually come out of it okay. But the thing that we got to be concerned about is how we're going to come out of it. Are we going to come out of it by the strength and will of corporations, unelected people, people telling us how to believe, what to believe, and people that are ultimately separating us from those rights that make us unique? that are contained in our Constitution, our way of life. And when America has come out great, when America has come out with one of these crises and come out great, is because they followed the guidebook while they were going through the problem. That's one. And you're going to have to elect people that are willing to do that. You're going to have to find people that are willing to say, I know you're afraid, but this document says we can't do that to these people. You know, you got to be able to say that. Right. You got to have people there that don't need to be there, don't necessarily want to be there, but feel as they're actually there doing a duty and serving. Because as you guys have pointed out, there's very few people out there that have a real concern for that's their number one concern. And I think that's probably the first thing I would look for when I'm looking to vote for somebody. So I guess I would say is, you know, keep hope alive. We just watched something happen in Virginia that I pray is going to keep going for another year.
Absolutely.
I really think if you look at the way that this administration has handled the last year and a half, or it's going on 2 years now, the way that they've handled that has been atrocious. Mandates, you know, coming this late, you know, still a CDC that's compliant and not checking on the efficacy of this vaccine. Right. The FDA and the CDC don't even perform the functions that people think they perform. And they really don't. They're right. More of a profit test committee that we give out for free to corporations. But that's it. You know, so I think you need people that are going to watch that and be willing to stand up to it. And I think that's what happened in Virginia. People are seeing it, getting sick of it. I think that's going to happen next year, and I think we'll win the House back. We should keep this in check. And I look for probably in West Virginia the Republican position in the House and the Senate growing more, because we're awake and people are watching this, and people are learning to go out and find a podcast like you guys, or you know, read a different news source to figure out what's going on in your community. People are awake, man, and one thing I'll tell you that you know, there's a lot more people engaged than you think. I get a lot more emails, a lot more phone calls, a lot more messages than you guys would think.
Sure.
That is one thing that, you know, with big tech coming along, I understand that, you know, we've been abused at some points, but I will tell you, in terms of talking to guys that have been there a long time in the legislature, they'll tell you that the scrutiny that you get put under now in the state legislature is, they would come in 20 years ago, do something, not even tell them, nobody even know what they did. Right. You know, nobody's reporting on it. Nobody's really keeping track of it. Now I take a vote on a bill. I got 3 neighbors on my street sending me a message about, hey, what's going on with that?
Good deal. That's what we need. We need more people engaged.
And I think that's what I'm telling you guys. There's hope out there, because we are under more scrutiny right now than we've ever been.
Good.
And that keeps democracy healthy.
Absolutely.
One last thing, man, and I'm sorry, I need to ask this because it was another important thing you said. You said that you're going to resist in the 17th, and you said to resist. How do we do that? You know, and stay within the confines of the law. I believe that, like Roger, it's very clever, you know, what he said. But you know, how do we resist, and how do I put this? I mean, just how do we do it and stay within the right without being seen as a radical or
no way,
you know, you know, some type of extremist. If parents are being listened to, I mean, and looked at hard by Merrick Garland and the FBI, what's happening to the average American who, West Virginian who says, I'm not going to comply? I mean, peaceful noncompliance, what does that mean? I guess is the best way to put it. How do we do it?
Well, you just exercise your rights within the law. I mean, it's the same guiding principle that we had hoped the government would abide by is, act within yourself. But as soon as you harm somebody else, you're in the wrong,
Right.
So if your noncompliance is standing there and saying, I'm not going to do it. If your noncompliance is going to the legislature and making yourself heard, driving up there and going to their committee meetings, getting appointments and going in their offices and telling them, hey, we need these protections.
Sure.
That's peaceful noncompliance. That's peaceful protest.
Well,
I think it's when we go to harm somebody else or go to harm some property or something like that.
sure.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. Everything healthy about letting your government know how you feel about what they've done.
Sure.
I think it's also talking about it like you're talking about. I don't think that this country's at a point of boiling over into physical conflict. One, I don't think that. I mean, I was in the military,
Sure.
and there was at no point in time that I was in the Marines that I would have followed an order to go after my own country. I
Right.
think that's about everybody in the military. They're not going to do that. Local law enforcement isn't going to do that. Your sheriffs, your neighbor, the deputies and so forth, they're not going to do that. The people that want to push this agenda realize that they do not have the physical force to make you do it.
Sure.
What they do have by, way of being propped up by the corporations is the economic power to make you do it.
Right.
So terrorism.
That's
Economic terrorism.
Work mandates. You work for the federal government, you're going to have it. On down the line, you won't be able to shop here. These stores could deny you entry if you're not vaccinated, this, that, and the other. Charging you more for your health insurance. They'll just make it so economically uncomfortable for you. You'll go do it just to not have to put up with it.
Yep.
And that's the type of coercion and persuasion they're going to use. And I think that's something that we have to be cognizant of and resist. We have to resist that.
It's just that,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. But the thing that scares me, and the image I always have, Brandon, is Katrina.
Yeah.
Where there's video of National Guards saying, I never thought I'd be doing this. And to know that General Honore is now, buddies with right there, and following Biden's agenda. And so, and that's what scares me. That's the point that where I think we really have lost everything if we ever have another Katrina-like, where you're going door to door taking weapons from people who are staying in their home in high and dry areas and tackling little old ladies, in their kitchen because they have a revolver. That's what scares me. That's what worries me. And I don't think it would ever come to West Virginia. I think I have faith in people, and I know that at some point enough would be enough. But I just hope people hear and listen to the things you've had to say tonight. And again, I'm going to post the full videos I'm going to link to the full videos on Facebook. I highly recommend everybody check out what Brandon said in full. Watch it in full because it's powerful, it's moving. And Brandon, you are a a super patriot in our book, man. And thank you for coming on. And and anytime you have anything to say, reach out to us, and we'll get it to all 3 or 4 of our viewers. So
I just have one last thing to say. Let's go, Brandon.
I'm gonna have to get a billboard and put it on there.
Yes, I'll be the first one.
I tell you what, when it's time to see signs,
let's
I'm
go.
going to be
Brandon.
holding one.
And thank you guys. Thank you for having me on and everything else. Love doing it.
Absolutely,
Pleasure,
man.
sir.
Thanks,
Thank you.
And thanks for your
I'll keep
service.
my eye on you.
All right. Thank
Brandon.
you.
All right, buddy.
Purple shrines on our head. Phenobarbital makes us dead. To heaven's gate we will go. To climb aboard
For God, for country, for truth, for justice, for the Republic. You're listening to the Powder Monkey Podcast on PirateInfoWars.com.
The comet's coming, it's getting near. Our conscience numbing, we have no fear. I called my friends up and they're all here. For pudding and vodka, yeah.
Was that you? Trying to reach you for days.
They don't care about the truth. They just want to run with this juvenile narrative.
Well, yeah, they're authoritarians, and they're making their move, and big tech's allied with dying corporate media and dying political systems and the Chi-Coms and the EU and Hollywood and all this, and they're just going, yeah, we're thugs. We're making our move, and now they're saying we're going to take your banking away. We're going to harass you at your house. I mean, it's happening to me. It's happening to you. They are really, really pushing it, Gavin. Where do you think all this goes?
We have to start our own pirate ships and fight back. You know,
PirateInfoWars.com. Pirating since before it was hip.